Hello, welcome to Satan Show. I am, the imposter, LL Tack. From this episode, I will talk about God's size and observing the reported events across the globe through the eyes of a demigod, and not a human. It is a much better way to understand the extent of the planetary extortion constantly unfolding before us. Witnessing the world as transcontinentalists, the heirs and newly fashioned aristocrats do, believing in themselves immortals and viewing the entire planet from this everlasting towering perch. Keep in mind their average lifespan is 100 years, barely 2 generations since the onslaught of the first of 3 global-wide conflicts. The inaugural World War, when Britain finally seized control of the North and South American continent, fought well before the second one in 1914. The sole English country administering the land masses along with absolute dominance of the Earth's shipping routes, navigating all of the oceans and seas. Greed and vanity demonstrated the great Eurasia African monarch's vengeful campaign commencing in 1810 after the American colonist revolted, breaking the agreement of 1776 that destroyed the mighty Indian nations and granted land ownership for the first time to peasants themselves. The United States became free after 1812 until 1861, then drawn back into the decades-long global conflicts of the First WW. Hidden history shows the hostilities concluded at the end of 1888 with England the lone superpower of the entire planet. Brought back into World War I that persisted for 78 years, its termination occurred 22 years since the execution by firing squad of then-President Lincoln. Included in the assassinations were all the loyal generals falsely labeled Confederates. Those lost patriots following Stonewall Jackson's legacy, with America controlling its own currency for 49 years, hoping the future free of indebted slavery for its citizens' offspring. Because of the complicated and complete birth-to-death system the transcontinentalists utilized, curtailing all the inhabitants of the planet in a past wrongs, or a forthcoming hopeful hypnotic state of mind. That is only the billions of humans that have access to state-run terror death squads, freedom fighters or rebels, print, radio, or television. It is difficult at times to maneuver the massive amount of information attempting to decipher their true intentions. Therefore, creating the haze of the mental incarceration has worked brilliantly in the International's favor. Contemplations hold all of us captives to the transcontinentalists' commands all day long through the encompassing propaganda machine. Imperative to their imperial control of one-word initiators sent across the airwaves. Stress and confusion lay the foundations of the continual clouding and fooling the global view of present reality. The people who do poorly in life, despairingly are trapped in their past that they nor anyone else can ever change. The citizens that are performing well in society have a future illusion guiding them each day. Which is a complete fantasy also, since it has not yet happened. Their hopeful hallucination is just not opaque, shrouded dark with desolation and death as the relinquished days of lost chances for the downtrodden dupes stuck in their miserable antiquities. What this means is no one has taken the time really to think about what would transpire finding themselves caught in a false sense of security of the imaginary super guardian. God, the enigmatic Lord Almighty. Given the whole world is then ensnared irrationally, reaching for what was once lost or may never happen in the illusory cognitive trap perpetuated by the Torah, Quran, or King James Bible. Dread and displacement meets the criteria for education, terribly taught to the modern-day natives that will not submit and die to free their lands for current colonization. From the very beginning, the decrees sent by the rulers and received by the peasant for their tortured ignorant consumption. All illiterates have the same hardened hand grasping their throats to make sure they become part of the warped one-sided death-loving history cults ruling the planet today, the British Islamist Judaic Catholics. The programming by peer pressure local societies fashioned and perfected at the British Global Public School Systems Ministry. All countries of the earth have to mimic the imperial indoctrination proclamation sent offshore from the governing Atlantic island. Even across the English Channel to Eurasia, Indonesia, Australia, New Zealand, and Africa. Who does not want to be queen or king of the worldwide Commonwealth's empire? Tendering information towards the transcontinentalists is a different story. The nurturing of the internationals themselves finds a design strictly enforced by the demigods for their divine descendants alone, raised by generational servants and nannies before attending ultra-expensive private institutions. The aging sycophants showing their heirs the many land masses that will one day be theirs by inheritance of fraudulent past deals, not the native inhabitants that lived continually on the property for hundreds of thousands of years. All of this was set up epochs ago and evolves as the transcontinental aristocratic system transfers to the next up-incoming nations, to perpetuate millennial dynasties' reigns. No one really endures indefinitely, nevertheless, the system tells the transcontinentalists they could through their children and accepting the Judaic Islamist Catholic created God as their master. With this in mind, would you not like to own America when you turn 300 years old, having their divine everlasting protection? Then why stop there, when you could have the whole world instead, employing conditioning cons, tricking people through the ages of the created religions? All done with the help of the Catholic Islamic Judaic cults via London, Rome, Paris, New York, Mecca, and Tel Aviv/Jerusalem. The cultist following occurs greatly throughout the globe. Unfortunately, it has only resulted in most cheated individuals believing they are transient beings able to breach planes of corporeality, hence losing touch with actuality. Nothing can exist where something else already does. It is impossible, not improbable. Before there can be a heaven or hell, the vacuumed space for them to occupy needs to become available. Some would call the vacated area, frontier land. Today we all can live forever in one form or another if only we believe enough from what is said, our utter lunacy in not relinquishing the past or seeing the future unwritten in stone. With empathy and live TV we share experiences that are not ours, fooling our subconscious to believe the pictures and videos as solid substance sent from the Lord above us. Beyond the scrawled cave paintings we witness dancing in the flickering flames of the cooking heating fire, which if construed correctly becomes idle amusement and not a divine message for the ancient ignorant Indians. Then why today do we not see through the deception and realize we are free to fashion any fantasy we want to become reality for our future, if all humanity being lords of the land ourselves? The reason is we do not blaspheme the non-existent entity and go all the way as the grand rabbis, gurus, pope, muftis, and imams doing as thou whilst. Observe the world as eternal demigods to understand the magnitude of the ageless global deception. Every person believes in a higher power, a super being, hedging his or her bet. For proof, ask around to find someone actually willing to curse God, a real old-fashioned rant on how much it has let the human race suffer. Taking Satan's side, instructing the Almighty to go to hell for what has happened on its watch. They will not chance it, fearful down to their most hateful core. Unable to damn I am, Jehovah and Allah for the transgressions it instigated against its charges, unyielding from the moment when it created people. Most of us do not think of God as an entity of only wants, no needs. It existed before anything else did, therefore it requires nothing to continue on, everlasting. So it only has wants, all is here today because of its desires to pleasure itself. To believe that something could be that powerful, unaccountable, and completely unexplainable, designing the universes and galaxies that have existed from the very beginning of time, is overwhelmingly simple-minded. It is what we would expect from our ancestors to imagine, helping them pass the long hours of their primitive days. Large collections of matter increasing in size dictate whether a gigantic black hole. The internal gravitational eclipsed enormous sun goes supernova and explodes, destroying near bodies and disrupting the far solar systems momentarily orbiting it. Then the other collisions of free-traveling objects not restrained to a certain path crossing or affecting as meteors or asteroids, are the only changes that ever happen in continual space. Not the single monstrous detonation set in motion by the hand of the great I Am, also known as the Big Bang. Deity-sized and through God's eyes, we can see the elite have us chasing our tails going from mercantilism back to feudalism. Carbon tax is about the air you breathe. No one would stand for what you inhale being levied, oxygen, that can blow up when compressed in heavy quantities. However, what you exhale is a different story. Lowly carbon dioxide, as harmless as to be used as a propellant for children's BB guns. The misled people are afraid of a completely inert gas that escapes from the Earth's upper atmosphere and can never grow to noxious dangerous levels along the planet's surface. Is now the new boogeyman, replacing the coming ice age of the 70s and 80s. If there really were a planet-wide problem, the electric power companies would collect the coal smoke exhaust of the generation stations and turn it into diesel fuel. South Africa for the past 20 years, burns giant chunks of the fossil fuel underground, siphons the smoke up for vapor to liquid conversion and distributes it to the country's pumps. Once you can live forever and create global currencies from nothing to lend out with interest. It is easy to manipulate until the alignment of hundreds of years of multi-generational work produces fruit for your heirs, being eternally all-powerful through inheritance. These are the same transcontinentalists, generations who have presidents, premiers, and nobility assassinated when someone stands for the natives and poor people. Dividers are always elevated as the uniters as, conversely found eliminated. Remember, the system's peer pressure controls the classes at every level of income, equally with false morality. Making sure it perpetuates the divisions and keeps each individual in his or her place, by constantly policing one another's participants per status of your family and race. You think you are too good to hang out with me, or, what are you doing associating with those kinds of people? Always keeping one thing in common between each level, the doom and gloom projected into the dissenter mind's eye. However, we do have the means to change what we envision forthcoming. When we begin to fantasize about a different future, we will have one. Do not think what the system tells us are absolute and will happen, as a stratum atomic clock. It must forever be that way, or so they say the Democrats and Republicans. We have lost what our ancestors enjoyed, separation of church, state, and the ability to think for ourselves without fear of damnation or reprisal. All humanity is experiencing trouble breaking free of the wrong daydreams broadcasted by the mafia media of despair and death, leaving us no choice for peace and prosperity. Until we finally understand the nature of the propaganda beast that controls every single person, everywhere, we will not be free. Seeing what we want the imminent days and months to produce for us. Instead of only war, pestilence, and famine, the notion was unfathomable and out of our grasp just a short time ago. The agnostic Church of Relevance wants to build a better bridge than the one used by the North and South Americans today. The current Catholic Islamist Judaic cult's viaduct employed in traversing the treacherous snaking river of life, the metaphorical expanse engaged and aimed at the populations. Utilized to cross time from birth to death and then for some exhibiting extraordinary faith in nothing, the glorious unproven afterlife. The governmental structure we have these contemporary days is a very good example of the direction where we need to go in a civilized social secular way. Really to have change, it must be peaceful with humane compassion, no revenge since we are all accountable for our inaction following the status quo. We also must have options and examples of what we want the Republic's future to become, once finished with the new elections. We are having problems now because everyone knows what is wrong, just no solutions on how to fix it. If it were right for us to steal people's time for currency, therefore their lives, none of us would ever feel bad doing it. As humanity goes, we have lost almost all of it living in the giant brainwashing cities. Stranded, ghettoized, angry and unaided, surrounded, stuck in the middle of millions. It was impossible to feel that way only 100 years ago, and never before that in any gathering of human beings. The transcontinentalist system has fashioned a brutal person in a self-loathing society in the metropolises, targeting a new religion of global climate warming change, ordaining a carbon tax on the air we exhale. The way we cannibalize each other today is not indicative of how we evolved on the secured islands fleeing savage Africa. Where our chimp-like ancestors migrated to, escaping the enormous predators of the ice-aged massive continent, inventing human communal order safe from the chaotic interior mixture. You and I feel sick half the time because of indoctrination into an unnaturally barbaric British isolation-style school system, against all that is evolutionary and humane. The millennial conditioning perfected 200 years ago, morphing into modern times, adding lessons learned through trial and error, the results saved in secret Vatican, Mecca, Jerusalem, New York, or London libraries. The Egyptian Roman rules providing insensitive warriors for the transcontinentalists running the world out of Italy in the past, and now the British monarchy today. We Americans must be getting tired of fighting the Islamist Catholic Judaic battles for them, as they call us animals from their high saintly palaces. The United States must grow again and become a multi-continental completely anthropologically merged nation, and provide the shining example it once did behind the inspirational leadership of Andrew Jackson. He was the first true non-racist American president that steered a country towards freeing itself from underneath British imperial currency rule. Then decades later the nation fell back into it when we lost to the English at the end of 1866 during the battles of World War I. It was not the conclusion of the fake Civil War. Orwell wanted to use the true date 1884 and not 1984, for when the empire began in earnest to rewrite all history into their inbred cruel image. Yes, the internationals controlled all communications in America back then also. Especially with only word of mouth for transmitting information, easily affecting what the transcontinentalists wanted to at will, suiting their momentary needs. There seems to be only one answer remaining now: build a new and better bridge, a truly modern government. Furthermore, very important, we do not touch the old bridge, keeping the system in place to send out grandma's social security checks on time. The answer is to declare a new location for the coming Republic of the Americas, to rebuild or construct the northern states' capital between Canada and the US in Detroit. Use maybe Mexico City for the central states and somewhere in Brazil or farther towards Antarctica for the southern states' capital. These three places will be where the governesses from all the states meet and make national policies per their region. Our languages will be English, French, Portuguese and Spanish, our borders the oceans, thus linking the two continents as one. Unfortunately, a solitary individual will not do all of this alone, and absolutely no men will be single-handedly governing populations, even in the smaller cities. When women ruled past free societies, humanity flourished. Men strangle, ruining the communist and tyrannical countries they control. Only females will be our states' governors and lieutenants, while men run the military, reconstruction, building projects and sports. We will no longer have an executive, legislative branch of the federal government formulated before jet plane travel, and teleconferencing was commonplace. The permanent surrogate then fashioned with the Council of Governesses from all the states, convening either in Detroit for the US and Canada to debate and make policies. Mexico City for those states with the Bahamas, Turks, Caicos, Panama, Hispaniola, Cuba, etc., and then last, South America in Rio de Janeiro or whatever place they decide to use. We educate discerning how to run our state's logistics, maintenance, and employee payrolls, utilizing the newly created America's pesos dollar. Seize all property of the religious governmental universities for redistribution. Tie $1 million credits to a single person and them to the land at their birth with state government leases, to back the money for intrinsic value. Fiat currency is the only way to go within the Republic. I do not have any gold, do you? This is how it commences. If we start seeing a different future for ourselves and communicate promptly while working together, it becomes what we want for our heirs. We could have a minimal standard of free living and bring back nomadic tribal lifestyle. If we want more than that, individual capitalism takes over and you work for a car, a bigger home, etc. Instead of the free apartments and public transportation provided by the individual states. What has taken place in the consciousness past, found erased from the annuals of time, is not entirely lost. Our ancestors deceived by the internationals to slaughter the indigenous peoples of the world, humans that did not believe the transcontinentalists' con of private property, laid to waste. The Indians would not submit to extortion as we do for God. They grew tired of the lies and trinkets, not understanding that individual land ownership was possible with the invaders' system of living, before restricted from the entire public's use. All the while hearing about the great white lord saving them only once dead from what was a real millennial paradise, for a fictional never-before-seen afterlife. Just two possessions have real value to human beings, because of its existing nowhere else than planet Earth, the people and land. The time has come to organize and prepare for action. Voting can take place a few years from now during the 4th of July week or Thanksgiving holidays, even Christmas will work. It won't take very long before we are stable and restoring confidence in our justly elected leadership, once we take the necessary steps to construct our own modern republic ruled by equal laws for all, irrefutably. Thank you for listening to Satan Show. I am, the imposter, LL Tack.